in the military skills, we find that the minority officers do not shoot as well as the non-minorities. Now, how do you rationalize? I don't know. I can't explain that to you, but we're going to find out. And they don't swim as well. And when you give them a compass and send them across the terrain at night in a land navigation exercise, they don't do as well at that sort of thing.
That was former U.S. Marine Corps General Carl Mundy making the case on 60 Minutes back in 1993 that the reason minorities were not advancing within the Marine Corps was because minorities can't swim. Also, they don't shoot as well as white people. Minorities aren't as good as directions as white people are. So naturally, with General Mundy as the commandant of the Marine Corps, the Marines aren't going to have many minority officers. Yeah. 2 days after those comments aired on CBS's 60 Minutes, General Mundy apologized. It was not General Mundy's first brush with controversy. He had previously issued an order banning married people from joining the Marines. I'm not sure if that means he also thinks married people can't swim. But General Carl Mundy has not disappeared from public life since all of that. He was scheduled to speak, in fact, today in Washington at the Conservative Values Voter Summit. Presumably, he was scheduled to speak because of his, awesome values. Interestingly, General Mundy was on the schedule to appear today to talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But once that panel took the stage, General Mundy was not there. He did not show up. You want to know who did show up at today's summit, though? You may remember from this year's Hall of Fame candidates list, Dale Peterson. Dale Peterson tried and failed to win the Republican nomination for Alabama's agriculture commissioner earlier this year by starring in one of the best "I'm laughing at you, not with you" campaign ads of this year's election. Mr. Peterson was given top billing today at the Values Voter Summit, and he did not waste his opportunity in the spotlight.
We have in the administration today, I may get arrows or bullets shot at me or something, I don't know, but the thing about that is we got a guy that hates America. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, okay? So until we get rid of Barry or Barack, or I haven't seen his little feet on that birth certificate, so I don't know what he is, all right? But
so Carl Mundy, black people can't shoot, and Dale Peterson, Barry, Barack, whatever, let's see the birth certificate. That's the Values Voter Summit this year. Because Carl Mundy was a no-show, we do wait with bated breath to find out if this guy, who's on the schedule for tomorrow, is actually going to show up.
I would say we should not allow Muslims to serve in the U.S. military, and we have got to raise questions about whether we can afford to allow Muslims to immigrate into the United States at all. Permits, in my judgment, should not be granted to build even one more mosque in the United States of America, not one.
Because he's a religious freedom guy. That was a gentleman named Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, scheduled to appear tomorrow at the Values Voter Summit. You know, it would be one thing if this was just your average conservative movement, the president's secretly foreign, black people can't swim, I hate Muslims confab. But the General Mundy, Dale Peterson, Brian Fisher billing at this event is shared by Governor Tim Pawlenty, Governor Mitt Romney, Governor Mike Huckabee, Congressman Mike Pence, all of these Republicans who want to be seen as mainstream 2012 presidential contenders, all co-billed with, all standing alongside the deport all the Muslims guy. It's awkward. It's not quite as awkward as this, though. You want to know who got a huge rock star welcome today at the Values Voter Summit? Newly minted Delaware Republican Senate candidate Christine O'Donnell. Christine O'Donnell has this week become an instantaneous big star in the conservative movement. But here she is in her years as a religious right activist.
I'll tell you, I just came back from the Middle East, and it was refreshing. With all that's going on, it was refreshing not to be constantly bombarded with smut all the time.
All right, Christine, we're going to have to leave it there.
That was Christine O'Donnell arguing in 2004 on this network that the Middle East is actually a much more refreshing place to be because the way they treat women in the Middle East is much less smutty than the way women are treated in America. If only we had those anti-smut Middle East values here in America, it would be, in her words, refreshing. That Christine O'Donnell got a rock star welcome today at this event.
We are at war with a group that is getting their inspiration from their religious teachings. The cause of the violence is an Islamic culture that keeps hundreds of millions of people right on the edge of murder and mayhem 24 hours a day. There was virtually no Islamic presence in America until just a few decades ago. When the founders gathered at Constitution Hall, they did not gather there after having read the Quran. If they had reached into the Quran for inspiration, this would not today be a country you would much want to live in. For one thing, all the women in the audience would be treated like cattle. You'd be in a separate room listening to this speech, wearing a burqa. Thank you very much.
Tell you, I just came back from the Middle East, and it was refreshing with all that's going on. It was refreshing not to be constantly bombarded with smut all the time.
All right, Christine, we're going to have to leave it there.
Everybody keeps saying that what's happening in the Republican Party this year is the emergence of a whole new crop of conservatives. It is not a whole new crop of conservatives. These folks have been around conservative politics for a long time. This is just the first year that so many of them have tried to make the miasma of very, very, very far-right conservative movement politics into a cogent Republican Party platform for the midterm elections. Joining us now is Frank Schaeffer. He's the author of the book Crazy for God, How I Grew Up as One of the Elect, helped found the religious right, and lived to take all or almost all of it back. Mr. Schaeffer, thank you so much for coming back on the show tonight. It's nice to see you.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Good to be back.
So everybody's been saying all year that the religious right is really disenfranchised in Republican politics right now. Fiscal conservatives have taken over the party. It seems to me like the religious right is really back. Do you think that it is?
Look, it's like claims for cures for cancer. You know, there's always something coming along saying that, you know, now there's a cure, but it always comes back that it's not quite the cure. The religious right is a fundraising operation. It's not a political operation at all. People like Gary Bauer, who I knew back in the day when I was in the religious right, and my dad was a leader and I was a leader, before I dropped out in the early 80s, was in the same business he's in tonight. And so when he comes in there bashing Muslims, but say wasn't bashing them before 9/11, or when people show up and say it's refreshing to be in the Middle East before 9/11 and then come back and change their minds, you have to understand they don't have a real ideology. These are fundraising opportunists, not political opportunists. And of course, the Republican Party is now saddled with a leadership that are so cowardly, people like Mitt Romney and McCain and the others, that they don't stand up against these guys and say, look, you know, we need you like we need a hole in the head. What you're all about is raising money for things like your family organizations and all the rest. You keep changing your tune. It's gays, it's blacks, it's Muslims, circle the wagons, real Americans stand up, the Sarah Palin shtick. And Sarah Palin's the greatest example. She serves half a term as governor and drops out to make a buck. These are flakes. And I used to be one of them. And thank God I got out, and I mean that literally because I'm still a believing Christian. I'm not that kind of Christian, but I'm a Christian. And you have to understand, these people are about fundraising for their organizations, and they will latch onto anything. And if that means they're sometimes sounding like they're fomenting a little violence, they'll do it. If it comes off as racist or xenophobic or anti-Muslim. And let me just say this. I had a son who's in the Marine Corps. And I'm loyal to the Marines and the men and women in the Marine Corps and our other armed services. And it makes me sick to see a group that wraps itself in the flag, stoking the flames of anti-Islamic phobia in exactly the way that will result in people like those young Marines who served with my son getting killed while these cowards raise money based on stoking these flames. That's who Newt Gingrich is. That's who these people are today. And it's disgusting.
Frank, I feel like the Beltway media take on what's going on in the Republican Party and the conservative movement right now hasn't really yet caught up to the fact that there's a lot of people from the religious right who have been longtime conservative movement figures who are really rising to power here. I mean, somebody like Christine O'Donnell has been running for office for a long time. Somebody like Sharon Angle has been active in movement politics in the Southwest for a very long time. These folks are not new. What do you think that people who are used to covering just red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat, should understand about the influence of this religious right conservative movement, as you say, fundraising operation in the Republican Party? What should people be on the alert for?
Well, they have to dig a little deeper the way you do on your show. And the fact of the matter is the media doesn't do this. They always say on the one hand this, on the other hand that, and they take these people at face value. The first thing you have to do is strip away this idea that these are serious people. They're not. The religious right is a fundraising operation for various organizations, whether that's Focus on the Family or any of these other groups. People like Gary Bauer, if he's not running for president and trying to raise money that way, the same way Pat Robertson did, which was never a serious run. It was just about Pat's building his empire and so forth. We'll cycle back always into the mixture until they just grow old and die in it. And we have these new people coming along like Christine O'Donnell, new to the nation, but have just used old baggage when it comes to this group. It's always the same people. The real story here is this. The Republican Party has to be held to account. These are your people, my fellow Republican, former fellow Republicans. If you don't speak up against them, then they become your problem. The problem is the lines are fuzzy. And so you have all these Republican candidates who actually pick up part of this fundraising pitch from people like Gary Bauer, fold it into their own machinery, use it. They know perfectly well that these guys are flakes. They know perfectly well that they're not serious. They also know perfectly well that there are a lot of people out there, particularly in white, middle class, and lower middle class America, who are disgruntled enough to be moved by messages of hatred and xenophobia, and they're cashing in on it. It's the same old playbook again and again and again and again and again. But now it's taken a dangerous twist with all this anti-Islamic rhetoric, because our men and women will get killed because of the kind of things being said by these people, and there's absolutely no need for stirring up a wartime situation to take advantage of it for short-term domestic gain. And so the Republicans deserve what they're going to get in November, which is far less result than they're hoping for. And I would just urge people, you know, you're saying what to do about this, how to stay alert. Well, one thing we can stay alert for is that whether we agree with everything the Obama administration is doing or not, or whatever it may be, we have to root for Democrats and reasonable people in this next election to stop these flakes from suddenly becoming our national leadership.
Frank Schaeffer, author of the book Crazy for God. Frank, thank you very much for your time tonight. It's good to have you on the show.
My pleasure.